All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Okay. Welcome to this week's session over here. So as usual, okay, we'll run through the markets and see if you guys have any questions. Feel free to let me know. Type it into the chat. Can then talk about it. Okay. So just some minor adjustment. Previously, what we do is on Monday we usually conduct this kind of live session in Chinese and Mandarin. And then on Tuesday we do it in English, right? So moving forward, at least for um, for the remaining of this month in April as well as in May, tentatively what we're gonna do is we're just gonna be doing a live stream on Monday. Okay, and it's just gonna be on English itself. Okay, so just Monday on a week-to-week basis. And of course, these sessions are, you know, interactive. Obviously, I'll be talking about the markets most of the time, but just feel free to type into the chat, right? If there's any questions you'd like to ask or any particular instruments you just like me to cover a little bit on. Okay. So this week here, last Friday is actually a Easter holiday, right? So of course, in Malaysia, we don't really do celebrate that. But you can see that some of the countries, it's actually an official holiday. Okay, so the market has been a little bit slower since last Friday, going into today as well, Monday. At least you can see here most of the Europe side and UK is having its holiday, right? Yeah, so things are relatively going to be slower. But of course, as we progress throughout the week, definitely things are going to pick back up, right? Recent volatility has been a bit of a mix. We did, see some sudden increase in movement, and then after that, kind of died down as well. If you're kind of aware, of course, there's a lot of like development in international trade policies in the past 1 to 2 weeks, right? And I think it's still currently developing, so things are a little bit tricky. Okay, but obviously, we don't want to rush into things. We just want to follow, our trading processes, our trading plan as usual. Okay, so over here, I will first walk through the overview of the major instruments I'm looking at. Okay, then I'll talk a little bit about some of the setups available. Very unfortunate we had like pound cat, but price kind of like just disregard our entry and kind of hit our stop like earlier today as well. So I'll cover a little bit on that as we progress into the setups, right? But let's talk about the major currencies and instruments over here that I'm looking at. Specifically in terms of like dollar related, a lot of it for now it's basically neutral simply because we had an impulsive move recently, right? And oftentimes when we get an impulsive move, at least on a higher time frame perspective, I tend to give the instrument on the market some time to kind of settle down first. Because after an impulsive move, oftentimes we'll see some sort of a pullback or retracement, or at times, market might actually even do a reversal, right, or sharp U-turn. So we do not want to be like jumping into a trade at the end of an impulse, right? And oftentimes after an impulsive move, we just need to see what's going to develop next. So in that instance, right, you look at dollar index over here on a 4-hour time frame perspective. We have the dollar weakening quite a bit. Okay, of course, this combines with fundamental perspective where there's an anticipation of Fed cutting rates, which is, to be honest, not surprising. It's always a cycle, after a peak on hiking, very naturally it will then progress into cutting, and after cutting, after easing, it will then naturally proceed into a tightening policies. That's how the cycle works, right? But I think what additional forces that came in was Trump's international trade policy, right? Kind of tariff war and things like that. So I think moving forward, while things are settling down, it's not 100% crystal clear yet. Okay, negotiations are still taking place, so volatility can still spike back in on dollar. Okay, And of course, you can see if you're tracking gold, gold has hit like all-time high, right? And it's still going up. Okay, and that kind of speak a little bit not only from the dollar perspective, but also the sentiment in the market. Yeah, so dollar index right now, based on a technical point of view, generally is neutral. Okay, but after this impulsive move, we at least can expect some sort of a pullback, right? So short term, depending on what the market price is going to do, we might get a short-term pullback trade, okay, or what we call a retracement trade, meaning we are trading the retracement, we are trading it short-term, and then after which, depending on how that retracement is going to take place and what pattern is going to develop, we may get um, one more opportunity to sell it, right, in terms of the dollar index. So right now I'm neutral. Basically, you can see, we just get an impulsive push down. We just want to see what happened next. Okay, so this one here, probably you just want to wait. Okay, nothing much to really touch on for the dollar index. Okay, just be patient. Then of course that kind of like is going to be the same for euro. Okay, because they're kind of inverse in relationship itself. So this one here, I'm also neutral. Kind of expect a little bit of pullback. So as I mentioned, short term we might trade the retracement depending on the setups that's going to occur, and then depending on how that develops as well, we might get one more push, right? So all this here, we're just going to be neutral. Maybe we need at least another 2 to 3 days, which means by closer maybe towards Thursday, we'll probably get an idea if you can get a pullback trade, right? A short-term pullback trade. Okay, GBP USD here. Initial kind of expectation was that we are testing the top of the range, right? And we're kind of expecting some sort of a reaction. But of course, we don't just jump in and sell just because it's price is testing the top of the channel. Right now, what we're seeing is that price is breaking it, right? But you don't want to kind of like immediately say, all right, we're going to be bullish and then start looking to buy. Because sometimes what we observe is after a break, the market can just instantly reverse. Right, and that's the part where after an impulsive move, I tend to be just a bit patient and really want to see what's going to happen next. Okay, because if price just V-shape back down, that can be a fake break. Okay, and obviously with that, we'll start to consider even looking at the sell side. Okay, um, after the break, if let's say the momentum continues further and then it just does a consolidation above that break, then that would mean something different. That would mean maybe, market is ready to go higher. Then we'll look for the buy setups, right? But until then, right now, we really don't have sufficient kind of information to really give us that directional bias that we can stick to, right? So right now, it's just being neutral on pound, okay? Aussie here, if you take a look at it from this scale, it's a very sharp V. It's a very sharp reversal. Price is actually breaking out of this entire resistance area as well. Not a conclusive break, but it's definitely breaking. We are eventually gonna likely be looking at upside on Aussie. Okay, so if you look at it from a big picture perspective, we have price taking out that low, then reverses sharply, testing the top of this here, right? So when we can get a correction, this pullback would naturally means upside. Okay, but to wait for this pullback to complete and take the buy probably is going to take a couple of weeks. Okay, and during this process itself, while it's doing its pullback, we can also look into that pullback trade, right? So that's where I term, short term trading the retracement. So obviously it's not now, you don't want to jump in now, but what we're looking at is if we can get an impulsive move back down. All right, this can be a fake breakout, and then we'll see if we can get the setup to sell it down, right? So this sell here is not going to be like a massive sell trend or massive bearish trend. It's just literally trading the pullback, right? So again, this might potentially develop into a setup for us maybe closer towards the second half of the week. We'll definitely keep an eye on that. Okay. Dollar Canadian continue to drop as well. But we are likely reaching the key area, right? So you can see we have the fib extension zone there. We have the channel, okay, and price can start to develop into a diagonal or a wedge pattern. So when that happens itself, naturally we'll be expecting upside, right? So we can also see it as this upside can be a U-turn. It can be just, you know, a break and a break of this structure here, you can see, right? And then this is just a pullback and retest. Okay, but whatever it is, we are expecting a little bit more downside, but I'm more inclined to really look out for that reversal trade. Okay, eventually. So it's dollar CAD is also building into something. You just need to be slightly patient for the first half of this week. Okay, so we'll see on that. Dollar yen, pretty similar in terms of like what is slightly developing to the dollar CAD as well, right? Again, a little bit of a break here, but again, price can just V-shape back up, right? So same kind of like viewpoint for the dollar CAD and the dollar yen, right? The only slight difference is we don't have that channel structure here, but you know, moving forward, I'm still expecting that pullback, right? And that opens up that short-term possibility of trading it to the upside. Okay, so most of these majors, you realize that I'm just being neutral. As I mentioned, you know, we just had that impulsive push. I just want to wait and see what's happening next. Then only we have some clearer directional bias that we can really lean into. Okay, gold hitting all-time high. To be honest, if you're trading, you know, depending on your setups, obviously, I didn't get any setups to get involved in the trading perspective. But gold since last year, I've been kind of also sharing, you know, from time to time. Fundamentally, you just want to buy gold, right? And you won't go wrong if you don't do a leverage position. Okay, meaning you're looking at it from a point of view where you're investing into it, which means that you probably wouldn't want to be like buying into a CFD position. You don't want to go in XAU USD. You probably want to look into ETF. You want to look into, you know, even like futures position. But of course, futures position, if you carry it overnight, there are some fees, you know, and things like that. But of course, ETF like GLD, there's no overnight fee, right? So meaning there's no pressure on holding it long term. Okay. So a lot of times traders would also ask, you know, how far can gold climb, right? What's the resistance? To be honest, from a technical point of view, there's no resistance now because it's all-time high. Can it go higher from here, right? Right now it's trading at 3400s, right? 3400. Can it go to 3500s? Can it go to 4000? Fundamentally, long-term perspective, the answer is yes, right? And if you ask me to pick a direction to project in the long run, it's just buy, right? Never sell gold if you're looking at it in the long run, right? The fundamental backdrop of that is because we are looking at gold as a precious metal commodities trading against a currency. Okay, it can be dollar, it can be whatever currency it is. Of course, most popular is XAU USD, right? Currency valuation are always in depreciation, and precious metal in a way there is quote unquote a finite quantity available, right? So if you put that two kind of logic and formula together, where one is always in depreciation and one is quote unquote finite, um, then naturally, you know, in over time, prices of that particular asset will go up. Okay, just the same logic can be applied into US equities market as well, right? Where if you talk about the S&P 500, companies that are not really performing would then be taken out from the index, and then better companies would then be added into the index, right? So fundamentally, the S&P 500 index would always be a representative of like that 500 companies that is representative of the US market. So naturally, there's that selection process, so fundamentally, that particular index would also rally and rise over time in the long run. So gold here, as I mentioned, I have positions on GLD, which is an ETF. Is it a good price to enter or add position in right now? Probably not. Okay. But if you're not trading gold and you just want to have a position on the longer term, then consider ETF, right? And I would say any sort of a pullback would naturally mean a buy opportunity on gold. Okay. Two major factors I'm looking at that is driving gold prices. Number one is obviously, we are obviously looking against the dollar, right? And I'm looking at this year, dollar would more likely devalue, which means the value of dollar would likely drop as compared to go higher. So that's one forces that would push XAU USD higher. The other perspective, of course, is uncertainty in terms of like market sentiment, and gold as a safer kind of safe asset, right? Safe haven asset. What the upside, right? So that's the two main factors I'm looking at that push gold prices higher. Okay, so if you're looking at potential entry or buying opportunity, my pick is to wait for the pullback. Okay, I personally wouldn't look to sell it at all, but focus on the buy side direction and just be patient for the pullback to get involved in the buy. Okay, so that's my take on gold. Okay, the thing about silver, which is its counterparty, is the perspective on gold rallying obviously would have some sort of a correlation to silver rallying as well. The only thing that it's really, I would put it as like not really confident in silver, like really pushing all the way up, is the fact that gold has been breaking highs, but silver hasn't been even able to break the high established last year in October, right? You can see this high is not even broken yet. Which opens up the possibility that silver and gold may diverge. Okay, so that's something just to be noting, right? So if you're gonna choose like one of the precious metal to really be focusing on the buy side, then you want to choose gold. Okay, at least for this year itself. Okay. However, of course, doesn't mean that you can't buy into silver. Okay, it's just showing you what I'm looking at between these two. Okay, and if you were to choose one, or if you need to choose one, right? Then I would say the bullish bias on gold is stronger than silver. Okay. So silver here, I'm neutral. You can see, right? The reason is because yes, we did get an impulsive push from here, but we haven't really taken out that high, right? So what this means is that it can be the possibility where this can actually just impulse back down, and then retest the bottom. Okay, because this high hasn't been taken out, right? So there are a few things that I need to see prices develop, but to give me a clearer confirmation or kind of confidence to kind of lean into one directional bias. But for now, there isn't any, because this can be a correction, then this would mean upside. This can be a little double top here, and then an impulsive flick down. That would mean short-term downside. Okay, so as of now, I'm just being neutral for silver. Okay, and we'll just want to see how it's going to develop next. right? So hopefully that's clear. Crude oil, okay, crude oil here, the bias is turning bullish. Um, we did get a little bit of a V shape. This seems to be doing a bit of a wedge. So obviously you don't want to be buying now, but if you can get a corrective pullback, that will be a buy opportunity somewhere there, right? Um, do we get a short-term sell? At the moment, we don't have a setup, right? If you look at crude oil, at the moment, we don't have a setup to sell. Okay. However, if we can develop something like that, right? If we develop something like that, then we have a setup to look at a short-term pullback, right? Maybe coming down there, then we look for the buy. So at this moment, at least for today's point of view, there isn't a short-term sell, right? So we're just leaning to the overall bias first, right? So that's on crude oil. S&P here turning bullish as well. Hey, we did get that drop, and then after that, a very sharp rally. Seems like this is developing into a simple tree wave. Okay, so somewhere between the 5080 zone might potentially complete the third wave, and then we can start to look for upside, right? Again, long term, US indices are likely going to be bullish, right? Overall, and then you factor in if this year we're going to go into a easing mode. Oftentimes that will also help to push equities up. Okay, so again, from a longer term investment point of view, you can see this dip as opportunities to get involved in a better price point, right? You can kind of like look at opportunities to add into your portfolio. So S&P over here, actually, we do have a setup as well. Okay, where you can see it's kind of also close to the 5080 level. This one here is a little bit lower, is at 5060, right? Where we're just looking at the simple setup here, right? Price made an impulsive move, break that high. So that's your break of structure, that's your swing low. Very massive momentum, right? So that creates a huge fair value gap. So far, this pullback seems corrected, which is great, right? But of course, bear in mind, last Friday was holiday. So, you need to factor that in as well, which means that contributed to the corrective move because it's a holiday season. Yeah, so this one here, if price can continue to just do a nice little pullback towards the 50,060 zone, that would give us the buy trade opportunity, right? Probably give you like 3 point something. If you target, where the previous high is, then your risk reward can go significantly higher. You can even consider, scaling out of it, which means if it hits target 1, you exit maybe half the position. If it goes target 2, exit maybe another remaining 20%, and things like that, right? You can plan for it. Okay, so that's my take on the S&P. Pound yen, very, very similar, kind of structure you can see here, right? V-shaped bounce. We're expecting 1, 2, 3. Somewhere around 185.80 will be a key area to look for upside. Okay, so pretty similar to S&P, right? Pound yen, I took this trade out already, right? Kind of closed it earlier. Didn't really like the fact that it's taking very long time, right? It kind of like came very, very close to our target last week. And then after that, just consolidate, right? But of course, again, as I mentioned, there is public holiday last week on Friday, right? But I just don't like holding on to it too long. So I just decide to just exit whatever I have on this, right? Can this go higher? Yes, but what we are looking at, there's also that possibility where this can come back down first and then only eventually go higher, right? So that's on a higher time frame H4, what we see. Okay, so that's my thought process. I just decide exit. Okay. Yeah, so that's on the pound yen side of things. Then yen, very similar. So I'm probably not going to spend too long talking about this as well. Very similar to the pound yen. I mean, their yen pairs event essentially, right? Pound auth, potentially we might get a sell if we can get a corrective pullback towards the 50% mark. Okay, it's not the cleanest structure, to be honest. This is very ugly. But if we can get a nice little corrective pullback towards like 2.11, we might get a sell opportunity, right? I mean, in the short term, I don't see a clear retracement buy trade, okay? Because of like this consolidation area here. There's nothing impulsive. There's no clear kind of rejection to the upside, even in the short term. So this one probably nothing much for the week, okay? Bitcoin, we managed to really make some move and progress to the upside. So I think overall, we are going to be transiting into bullish, right? So this is turning bullish. So wait for a pullback if you're into like crypto, can wait for the pullback, clear off some of this low here, right, as a potential liquidity sweep. If you pull FIPS, that would be somewhere around like close to 38.2 for a potential buy, right? Can the market come back down lower here, maybe 50% mark, of this entire swing? Possible as well, right? Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that price needs to bounce around the 38, or it doesn't mean that price needs to bounce definitely on the 50%. But the whole idea here is if we can get a corrective pullback, okay, you want to view that as a potential buy trade opportunity to the upside. Okay, so that's on Bitcoin. Very quickly, a touch on the couple of cross pairs that it's not in my usual list, but kind of presented some trading opportunities, right? So I'll talk about pound cat first, right? This was a little bit unfortunate, where it didn't really even give some sort of reaction around entry area, right? But this trade here on the sell side of things is naturally a counter. Okay, depending again on your time horizon, right? But to me, it's a short-term pullback trade because what I'm seeing here on a H4 is we have this transition up, right? We have the break of this low, break of this high, and we have a pretty impulsive lane, right? So we are naturally expecting more upside eventually. The sell trade setup is in anticipation of just a simple pullback, right? We're expecting something like that. Okay, so that's aka you can call it a counter trend sell, you can call it a retracement sell, but that's basically the logic and idea behind. Yeah, so obviously that didn't play out. Kind of hit the stop and then kind of just got out on this trade, right? Yeah, so nothing much on that, right? I think all the conditions are there. The only subtle thing that is not the clearest of all is obviously this liquidity sweep, right? I mean, there is technically that element of it, but it's just not the cleanest, right? I mean, a clean liquidity sweep would be something like that, right? With some gaps in between, you can see, right? So this one here, that isn't really that scoop. Okay, you can see that's this area of gap, right? This one here, that isn't. So this is a cleaner liquidity sweep, right? That ideally would want it there, right? But obviously it's not. Yeah, again, nothing is going to be perfect, right? I'm not waiting for perfection to take a trade. Just saying that, that element is not like the cleanest of all. So it didn't work out. That's on the pound cap. I'm also eyeing the Euro New Zealand. Okay, so maybe I show you the higher time frame first. Again, not the typical pair that I have in my week, like day to day and week to week. But I was just scanning through, across all the pairs, all the common pairs in FX, right? And I kind of saw that, hey, there is that possible opportunity over here in Euro New Zealand. H4 perspective, we have that, fake break and then the market just reverses, come back down. We not only break this low, but we form a new low, price went up, we form another low, right? So kind of having that series of lower low, lower high, and therefore, on the lower time frame, we're looking at this setup. Okay, very, very simple understanding. Now, on the lower time frame, we don't really have a fair value gap, which kind of indicate a momentum to downside. But on the higher time frame, H4, we have this break of structure, right? So again, nothing is in perfection. Okay, it's just sometimes we do get like everything really there. Sometimes we are missing certain elements, but it's really down to the part where are we okay to take that, right? Do we accept um, that this trade doesn't have all the elements to it, but there's still that probability of going down, and then we just make the decision: can we accept if this trade doesn't work out, right? Yeah, so that's on New Zealand, right? Euro Kiwi, right? So a couple of things I'm looking. Of course, pound yen is out. So a couple of things I'm kind of monitoring for now, at least, is the S&P 500, and then the Euro New Zealand. Okay. Now, one of you actually did ask about Euro Pound, right? To be honest, I did look at Euro Pound earlier today as well, right? Because there's like a very decent opportunity available as well, right? You can see this and Euro New Zealand, to be very, very honest, pretty close to one another in terms of the development of things. We have this impulsive drop. This seems to be developing in waves of three as well, right? We're expecting like at least one more move down. 1, 2, 3, right? And the only thing that I did not decide to put in kind of order is we did not take out this low, right? Euro New Zealand did. You can see that. And since I'm looking at Euro New Zealand, I decided not to have two sell position on the euro. Okay, and that was my main reason for not having this as a setup. But if you take a look at it on the lower time frame, right? So you kind of tag this here first, right? If you go down to the lower time frame, you can see my drawing, right? That was where I'm kind of like looking at it earlier today. If you look at the lower time frame here, we have this inner break, okay, inner low that gets broken. We obviously have that liquidity sweep there. This is the low broken as well. We do have that valid setup. As I mentioned, the only thing I'm kind of like not really looking at this because I already have the Euro Kiwi. Okay. But is this gonna be a valid, viable sell trade? Okay, the answer is yes. Right? The answer is yes. All right. So of course, if you're keen on looking at this, it's a fair and valid trade setup. Okay, and of course, if you also add in elements of like wave, right? Kind of have this here as well. Not the nicest channel in terms of like the entry point here. We might, still see that reaction there. Okay, so yeah, Euro Pound, very possible trade. Okay, so another way to manage this is, if I'm gonna look at this trade here, there's a good chance that Euro Pound might, if I'm gonna sell this, right, there's a good chance Euro Pound might be tagging before the Euro New Zealand because it's still some distance away. What you can also do is obviously, if Euro Pound got tagged in and this trade starts to work out nicely, right? You can shift stops to break even, remove the risk on this particular trade, and then you can still take the Euro New Zealand eventually. Okay, so for me, it's just a little bit on the risk exposure perspective on similar currencies and similar direction. Okay, but again, Euro Pound is something that is worth noting. Oh, okay. Yeah, so generally that's what I have. Let me see if there's anything worth talking about over here. Okay, nothing much. Good. Okay, so I hope the updates on this has been clear. Um, there are some things that I think it's worth noting. The dollar related pairs likely setting up some of a pullback trade opportunity. Okay. And then of course in terms of like the S&P, Euro New Zealand, or even Euro Pound, I think it's worth noting we can keep track of those. Okay. Yeah, so all the best for this week. Um, I'll continue to keep you guys updated, as usual, on a daily basis, and then we'll see how things go from there. Okay, so all the best. See you guys next time.